The morning sun filtered through the bioglass dome of Andromeda Military Institute, casting long shadows across the training grounds where cadets from 17 different species honed their combat skills. Located on the neutral moon of Kepler 442c, the Academy served as humanity's gateway into the Galactic Education Consortium, a prestigious institution that had shaped military leaders for over 3 centuries. In Classroom Delta 7, advanced combat theory was in session. Professor Vextar, a battle-scarred Krillian with 4 arms and skin like living granite, paced before holographic displays showing ancient battlefield tactics. His students, a diverse mix of the galaxy's finest young warriors, sat in tiered seating that accommodated everything from the massive, bear-like Thakin to the ethereal, floating Zephyr INS. In the back row, almost hidden behind her larger classmates, sat Zara Chun, while other humans at the Academy were typically assigned to diplomatic or scientific tracks. Zara had somehow qualified for the military program, though none of her instructors could figure out why. At barely 5'6", with shoulder-length black hair often tied in a simple ponytail, she looked more like a librarian than a warrior. The Battle of Zarian Prime, Professor Vextar continued, his gravelly voice echoing through the chamber, demonstrates why brute force alone cannot win wars. The hegemony forces outnumbered the defenders 10-1, yet they were completely annihilated. Can anyone tell me why? Korath, a towering Krillian cadet whose family had produced generals, for 6 generations, raised one of his 4 massive arms. Superior positioning and knowledge of the terrain, Professor. The defenders used the crystal formations to create choke points. Partially correct, Vextar nodded. But there was another factor, an unknown element that turned the tide completely. Lixa, a sleek Valen scout with silver skin and cat-like reflexes, spoke up. My people's intelligence reports mentioned ghost warriors soldiers who seemed to appear and disappear at will. But that's probably just propaganda. Several students chuckled, including the hulking Thakin twins, Grok and Thane, whose species prided themselves on being the galaxy's premier heavy infantry. Ghost warriors, Grok snorted through his tusks. Sounds like excuses for poor battlefield awareness. Professor Vextar's eyes gleamed with something approaching respect. The ghost warriors were very real, Cadet Grok. They eliminated 3 entire hegemony battalions in a single night, then vanished without a trace. No bodies were ever recovered. No identities confirmed. Zara continued taking notes, her pen moving steadily across the tablet, while her classmates debated theories about these mysterious soldiers. Her expression remained neutral, almost bored, as if the discussion of legendary warriors was no more interesting than a grocery list. Miss Chun, Professor Vextar's voice cut through the chatter. You've been remarkably quiet this semester. Surely humans have some perspective on asymmetric warfare? All eyes turned to Zara. She looked up from her notes, meeting the professor's 4-eyed gaze with calm brown eyes. Humans generally prefer diplomatic solutions, Professor. We're not really built for warfare like the other species here. The Thakin twins exchanged glances and barely suppressed grins. Korath's mandibles clicked in what passed for Krillian amusement. Even Lix's tail twitched with poorly concealed mirth. Indeed, Vextar said, his tone suggesting he found her response both expected and disappointing. Perhaps that's why humans have such a limited presence in the consortium's military academies. As the class period ended and students filed out, discussing their upcoming practical examinations, Zara remained seated, methodically organizing her notes. She waited until the room was empty before standing, slinging her simple canvas bag over her shoulder. Walking through the Academy's corridors, she passed trophy cases filled with artifacts from famous battles, memorial walls honoring fallen heroes, and recruitment posters featuring the galaxy's most elite fighting forces. Other students gave her polite nods, but rarely engaged in conversation. To them, she was just another human, peaceful, diplomatic, and utterly unremarkable in a place designed to forge the galaxy's next generation of military leaders. If only they knew that the Ghost Warriors they'd just been discussing had a name, Ghost Protocol, and that their most legendary operative was sitting right there in the back row, taking notes on her own classified missions. 3 weeks later, the Academy buzzed with excitement for the annual Trial by Combat exhibition. The grand amphitheater, carved from living coral that grew in zero gravity, could seat 15,000 spectators. Today, it hosted dignitaries from across the consortium, proud families, and military recruiters scouting for exceptional talent. Admiral Cassara, a distinguished Altarian with flowing tentacles and bioluminescent markings indicating her high rank, stood at the central podium. Her voice carried clearly through the amphitheater's acoustic design. Today, our finest cadets will demonstrate their skills against retired champions from across the galaxy. These exhibitions will test not only combat prowess, but strategic thinking, adaptability, and honor. In the competitors section, Zara sat between Marcus Webb, a fellow human studying diplomatic protocols, and Yuki Tanaka, who specialized in xenobiology. Unlike the other species cadets, who wore ceremonial armor or displayed traditional weapons, the three humans wore simple academy uniforms. "I can't believe they're making you participate," Marcus whispered, adjusting his nervous fidgeting with his tablet. "This is insane. We're diplomats, not warriors." Yuki nodded agreement, her eyes wide behind thick-rimmed glasses. "My parents will kill me if I get injured. I'm supposed to be studying peaceful first contact protocols, not fighting alien war." Veterans. Zara's response was a barely perceptible shrug. Her attention seemed focused on the holding area where the champions waited. Through reinforced transparent aluminum, she could see the exhibition's star attractions. A Vorthan blade master whose forearms moved in hypnotic patterns. A crystalline monk whose body literally sang with harmonic resonance, and most intimidating of all, Gorvik the Destroyer. Gorvik stood 12 feet tall, his reptilian hide scarred by countless battles. Once a general in the hegemony forces, he had achieved legendary status for single-handedly holding the Kepler Bridge for 6 days against overwhelming odds. His surrender had effectively ended the Terran hegemony war, earning him a warrior's retirement rather than a prisoner's fate. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Cassara announced, "our first exhibition will feature Cadet Korath facing the Vorthan Blade Master in a demonstration of classical sword techniques." The crowd erupted in cheers as Korath strode into the arena, his 4 arms wielding traditional Krillian blade staffs. The Vorthan champion, elegant and fluid, danced around his attacks with mesmerizing grace. Though clearly holding back to avoid seriously injuring the cadet, the champion's superior skill was evident in every parry and counter-strike. Exhibition after exhibition showcased the gap between academic training and true combat experience. Lixa's incredible speed meant nothing against the crystalline monk's predictive abilities. The Thakin twins' combined assault couldn't penetrate a Nexian shield master's defenses. Next, Admiral Cassara's voice carried a note of sympathy. "We have our human participants facing appropriate challenges." Marcus stumbled through a puzzle-solving exercise against a cerebral champion, managing respectably, but clearly out of his depth. Yuki's xenobiology knowledge helped her identify weaknesses in a holographic creature, but her lack of combat training showed painfully when forced to exploit them. And finally, the Admiral announced, "Cadet Zara Chun will face ... An explosion rocked the amphitheater. Emergency klaxons began wailing as the lights flickered and died, replaced by the hellish red glow of emergency illumination. Through the chaos, Admiral Cassara's voice crackled over the failing communication system. "Security breach in holding area 7. All champions are ... The feed cut to static ... in the darkness that followed, punctuated only by screaming and the sound of panic. Something massive smashed through the reinforced barriers of the holding area. Gorvik the Destroyer emerged into the amphitheater, but this wasn't the controlled veteran of moments before. His eyes blazed with artificial fury, and a small device attached to his neck pulsed with malevolent energy. A mind control implant. Someone had turned the galaxy's most dangerous retired warrior into a weapon. As security forces scrambled to respond and cadets fled in terror, Gorvik began systematically hunting. His first victim was a consortium officer who tried to establish communication. One swipe of the general's massive claws, and the officer was gone. In the chaos, as species after species of the galaxy's supposedly finest warriors ran or fell before the legendary champion, a small figure stepped into Gorvik's path. Zara Chun stood alone in the center of the amphitheater, perfectly still, as the 12-foot killing machine turned its attention toward her. Asterisk. Gorvik's artificially enhanced senses locked onto Zara with predatory precision. The mind control device on his neck pulsed faster, feeding combat stimulants directly into his nervous system while suppressing all higher reasoning. To the device's programming, she was simply another target to eliminate. The amphitheater fell into a horrified silence broken only by the distant wailing of alarms. Even the chaos of evacuation seemed to pause as thousands of spectators realized they were about to witness a massacre. In the VIP section, Admiral Cassara reached for her emergency communicator to order an immediate orbital strike on the amphitheater better. To lose the facility that allowed Gorvik to escape and rampage across the moon's populated areas. Marcus Webb, who had been pulled to safety by security personnel, broke free from their grasp. "Zara, run!" he screamed across the arena. "There's nowhere to hide down there." But Zara didn't run. She didn't even move as Gorvik charged toward her, his massive feet cracking the reinforced flooring with each thunderous step. The war champions. Claws extended to their full-length razor-sharp talons that could slice through combat armor like paper. 20 feet away, Gorvik launched himself into the air, all 600 pounds of enhanced muscle and bone aimed at crushing the tiny human. Who dared stand in his path? His roar echoed through the amphitheater like the sound of worlds ending. Zara moved. What happened next lasted 3 seconds, but those who witnessed it would debate the sequence for years afterward. Some swore she simply vanished and reappeared behind Gorvik. Others claimed she moved so fast that their eyes couldn't track her motion. The security cameras, designed to capture combat at superhuman speeds, showed only a blur. Gorvik's charge carried him past where Zara had been standing. His massive body slammed into the amphitheater wall with enough force to crack the living coral. When the dust settled, he lay motionless on the arena floor. Zara stood where Gorvik had landed, one hand extended toward his neck. The mind control device lay in pieces at her feet, its circuitry fried by whatever technique she had used to remove it. Her academy uniform was unmarked. Her breathing was steady. She might have been standing in line for lunch rather than having just neutralized the galaxy's most feared warrior. Gorvik stirred, shaking his massive head as his natural consciousness reasserted itself. His eyes, no longer blazing with artificial fury, found Zara and widened with recognition that transcended species barriers. This was the look one apex predator gave another. Impossible. Admiral Cassara breathed into her communicator, her bioluminescent patterns flickering in patterns that indicated extreme shock. Run full biometric analysis on the human. Cross-reference with all classified databases. Priority Alpha clearance. In the competitors section, Professor Vextar stood frozen, his 4 arms hanging limply at his sides. His tactical mind was already analyzing what he had witnessed, comparing it to classified reports he had read during his own military service. The speed, the precision, the complete absence of wasted motion, these were the hallmarks of only one known fighting force. Lix's sensitive Valen ears picked up whispered conversations throughout the amphitheater. Words like impossible and ghost protocol began to circulate among the military personnel present. Her tail twitched nervously as she realized she was looking at something that wasn't supposed to exist. Korath's mandibles clicked rapidly. Krillian's stress response. His warrior instincts were screaming that he was in the presence of a predator, so far beyond his capabilities that his species' genetic memory was triggering ancient survival protocols. As security forces finally reached the arena floor, Zara calmly walked over to Gorvik, who was now sitting up and examining the destroyed control device. She knelt beside the massive warrior and spoke in a voice too quiet for the spectators to hear, but her body language suggested she was asking about his condition rather than threatening him. Gorvik nodded slowly, then did something that sent shockwaves through every military mind present. He performed a traditional hegemony salute of respect to a superior warrior. Admiral Kasara's communicator crackled with an encrypted transmission from Consortium intelligence. The voice on the other end was tense with barely controlled urgency. Admiral, evacuate all non-essential personnel immediately. That human is classified beyond your clearance level. We have assets en route. Who is she? Kasara demanded. She's a ghost, Admiral, and ghosts aren't supposed to exist. As medical teams attended to the few injured spectators and security cordoned off the arena, Zara Chun stood quietly beside Gorvik, looking for all the world like a student who had stumbled into something far beyond her understanding. But her eyes, calm, alert, and constantly scanning for additional threats, told a different story. The secret she had guarded for 3 years at the academy was out. The quiet human in the back row, the one everyone dismissed as harmless, had just revealed herself to be something that galactic governments spent fortunes trying to create and empires feared to face. The question now was what would happen next. The Academy's secure briefing room had been designed to contain sensitive information. Its walls lined with quantum scramblers that could defeat any known surveillance technology. Now it held the most classified conversation in Consortium space. Admiral Kasara sat across from Zara, flanked by Director Vance from Consortium Intelligence and General Torek, a Krillian officer whose security clearance was higher than most planetary governors. Between them lay a holographic display showing Zara's official Academy records, alongside a second file marked with enough security classifications to start a war. Agent Cypher, Director Vance said, using a codename that hadn't been spoken aloud. In 5 years, the Ghost Protocol was officially terminated after the hegemony surrender. All operatives were debriefed, retired, and their identities sealed. Zara's response was measured, professional. Ghost Protocol 7 reporting, sir. I was assigned deep cover infiltration to assess Consortium military capabilities and identify potential threats to human space. My cover was holding until the situation required intervention. General Torak's mandibles clicked in agitation. You've been spying on us for 3 years? Evaluating our defenses? I've been protecting the peace, Zara corrected. The Terran hegemony war ended because both sides recognized the cost of continuation. My mission was to ensure that recognition remained mutual. Admiral Kasara's bioluminescent patterns shifted to deep blue, a sign of profound thought among her species. The attack today wasn't random, was it? Someone knew you were here. Director Vance activated another holographic display showing the destroyed mind control device. Our analysis indicates this technology is 3 generations beyond current Consortium capabilities. The fact that it was specifically designed to control Gorvik suggests someone with detailed knowledge of hegemony physiology and psychology. The Crimson Syndicate, Zara said quietly. They've been acquiring former hegemony military assets, trying to reverse engineer Ghost Protocol techniques. Today was a field test. They wanted to see if their controlled champion could kill a ghost. And instead, you prove that ghosts still exist, General Torek observed. Do you understand what you've done? The consortium's entire defense strategy is based on the assumption that humans are a minor military power. If other species learn that you've been hiding capabilities that exceed our best warriors, there will be panic, Admiral Cassara finished. Preemptive strikes. The peace treaty will collapse. Zara nodded grimly, which is exactly what the Syndicate wants. They profit from conflict, and they need the galaxy destabilized to operate freely. Director Vance leaned forward. How many of you are there? How many ghosts are still active? That's classified above your clearance level, sir, Zara replied politely. But I can tell you that today's attack won't be the last. The Syndicate has been patient, building their capabilities. They have assets throughout consortium space. An urgent chime indicated an incoming priority message. Admiral Cassara's aide, a young Altarian officer, entered with barely concealed terror on her features. Admiral, we're receiving distress calls from training facilities throughout the sector. Simultaneous attacks controlled champions, just like here. The holographic display updated to show a sector map with red indicators flashing at 17 different locations. Military academies, research stations, diplomatic compounds, all under attack by mind-controlled former champions. It's a coordinated assault, General Torek said, his voice grim. They're not just testing your capabilities, they're trying to force more ghosts into the open. Zara stood, her demeanor shifting from student operative. Sir, request permission to implement Emergency Protocol Delta. Director Vance hesitated. That protocol hasn't been used since the war. It requires DOT. It requires full operational autonomy and the activation of sleeper assets. Zara finished. We knew this day might come. The Syndicate has made their move. Now we make ours. Admiral Cassara watched the tactical display update with more attack vectors. How long do we have? The attacks are diversions, Zara explained, already moving toward the door. While consortium forces respond to the obvious targets, the Syndicate's real objective is the Nexus array on Kepler Prime. If they take control of the galaxy's primary communication network, they can coordinate the largest pirate offensive in history. And you can stop them? General Torek asked. Zara paused at the doorway, and for just a moment, her careful civilian facade dropped completely. What looked back at them was something that had ended wars and toppled empires, a weapon in human form that chose to protect, rather than destroy. Sir, she said quietly, ghosts don't just haunt the enemy's nightmares. We are the nightmare. As alarms continued to wail throughout the academy and emergency broadcasts filled the communication channels, Zara Chun walked through corridors filled with panicking students and faculty. But she was no longer the quiet observer hiding in the back row. She was Ghost Protocol 7, and she had work to do. Part 5. The Ghost War begins. The transport shuttle Meridian dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler Prime system, its stealth coating rendering it invisible to standard sensors. In the passenger compartment, Zara checked her equipment one final time. Weapons and gear that officially didn't exist, provided by a logistics network that had been dormant for 5 years. Her communication implant crackled with an encrypted signal. Ghost 7, this is Ghost Command. Status report. Insertion in 30 minutes, Zara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Syndicate forces have taken the primary communication array. Estimate 40 hostiles, including at least 6 controlled champions. Copy that. Ghost 2 and Ghost 5 are handling the diversionary attacks. You're our only asset in position to prevent total network compromise. Through the shuttle's viewport, Kepler Prime dominated the view, a massive space station built around a crystalline core that could process and relay communication across half the galaxy. Syndicate vessels surrounded it like parasites, their irregular designs a patchwork of stolen military technology and jury-rigged weapon systems. The shuttle's pilot, a grizzled human named Torres, who asked no questions and remembered nothing, began final approach procedures. 60 seconds to insertion point, ma'am. You sure about this? That's a lot of firepower down there. Zara's response was a slight smile that would have chilled anyone who understood its implications. Don't worry about the firepower, Torres. Worry about getting clear before the cleanup starts. At the Academy, Admiral Kesara watched the tactical display with growing concern. Reports flooded in from across the sector, attack after attack by controlled champions, each one designed to overwhelm local defenses and force military responses. The pattern was becoming clear. The Syndicate was stretching consortium forces to their breaking point. Admiral, her aide reported, voice tight with stress, we're receiving requests for reinforcements from 14 different facilities. We don't have enough ships to respond to them all. Then we prioritize, Kesara decided. Military academies first, then her words were cut off by an urgent communication from consortium intelligence. Director Vance's voice was tense with barely controlled panic. Admiral, we're losing contact with sector command nodes. Someone is systematically taking down our communication network. Professor Vextar, who had been granted emergency security clearance after the amphitheater incident, studied the pattern of attacks. It's brilliant, he admitted grudgingly. Create chaos with the diversions while striking at the central nervous system. Once communication is severed, coordination becomes impossible. In the competitors section, which had been converted into an emergency command center, the remaining cadets watched the unfolding crisis with growing understanding. Marcus Webb, his diplomatic training finally proving useful, was correlating attack patterns with known Syndicate operations. They've been planning this for years, he reported. Every target they're hitting was scouted months ago. Korath, his warrior instincts fully engaged, provided tactical analysis. The controlled champions aren't random selections. Each one is specifically chosen to counter the primary defenders at their target locations. This level of intelligence suggests deep infiltration of consortium security. Lixa's ears twitched as she monitored communication intercepts. There's something else. The attack patterns are too coordinated for the Syndicate's usual cell-based structure. Someone with military command experience is running this operation. Above, Kepler Prime, Zara's shuttle reached the insertion point. The massive station's superstructure provided cover for her approach, its kilometer-wide docking bays offering multiple entry points. But as Torres initiated the final approach, proximity alarms began screaming. Missile lock! Torres shouted, his hands flying over the controls. Multiple contacts, incoming fast. Zara was already moving, her body automatically adjusting for the violent evasive maneuvers as Torres threw the shuttle into a spiraling dive. Through the chaos, she could see the Syndicate's trap-automated defense systems that had been reprogrammed to fire on any approaching vessel. Can you get me close? She asked, her voice calm despite the shuttle bucking around them. Define close. Torres replied, sweat beading on his forehead as he manually piloted through the defensive fire. 500 meters from docking bay 7. Torres looked at her as if she'd lost her mind. That's a vacuum jump at terminal velocity. You'll be paced on the station's hull. Zara was already sealing her suit and checking her equipment. Torres, there are some things about ghosts that classified reports don't mention. Trust me on this one. The shuttle's hull rang like a bell as defensive fire bracketed their position. Through the viewport, Kepler Prime's superstructure rushed toward them at lethal speed. At precisely the right moment, as Torres pulled the shuttle into a desperate climb that would take him clear of the station's defense grid. Zara stepped out of the airlock. What happened next defied several laws of physics and would have been impossible for any baseline human. But Ghost Protocol operatives weren't baseline human. They were something else entirely, shaped by technologies and training that pushed the absolute limits of what organic life could achieve. Zara Chun hit the station's hull at nearly terminal velocity and simply ... stopped. Her impact was absorbed by systems that shouldn't have existed, converted to kinetic energy that she channeled into her first movement toward the docking bay. Inside, Kepler Prime's communication center. Syndicate Commander Vex, a rogue Krillian, whose 4 arms made him devastatingly effective with multiple weapons, monitored the progress of his operation. Around him, his subordinates worked frantically to penetrate the station's core systems, while controlled champions stood guard at strategic choke points. "Sir," one of his technicians reported, "we're detecting an unauthorized entry in Docking Bay 7. Shall I dispatch a patrol?" Commander Vex's mandibles clicked in amusement. "One intruder against 40 of the galaxy's finest? I think we can. Spare a few guards." He had no way of knowing that he had just made the last mistake of his career. The Ghost War had begun, and Zara Chun was coming for them all. Asterisk.